All right, guys. I like that. Cameron says this is about to get Western. It's been a while since I've done one of these live streams. On the membership group, I used to do them a lot on the paid side, and then I quit doing them because the Zoom calls were so interactive. But I might do some more. I actually find they're cool with guests. But for this stuff, for Q&As, it helps me just because I can kind of stay on point here. I think I even got my other, yeah, look at that, got my other camera working too. So it'll be fancy, but I will post a replay up obviously on this, guys. So if if you're tired of hearing me answer questions, I will post up a replay at the end. I'm guessing it's going to take me like hour and a half, and there's no way I'm going to get through all the questions that were submitted. I appreciate there's tons of in-depth ones, and I'm going to do something a little bit different relative to my previous ones. I'm going to try to actually be like rapid fire on a bunch of them, which is very difficult for me to do. Just so you know, you probably could tell that from my content. And if you guys want more details or anything like that as we go here, just hit me up in the chat. And the chat lags a little bit, guys. So and of course I'm the moderator. I'm the presenter, moderator, and everything else here. And I'm also getting used to this like two camera thing. It's kind of cool. But anyways, I might miss it in the chat. Say it again. You're welcome to do that within like reasonable bounds. So if a question goes through there and I don't see it or whatever, or if it's add on to I'm answering your question, whatever, just say something in the chat, and don't be bashful about it. So a couple things here. So a lot of you guys, I think all of you probably, given like the where I posted the link, you're in the membership group. I'll try to do more of these. I know in the past I've tried to do it monthly. It's not going to happen, guys. I'll try to do it every couple months where I get the free group on the membership side for a call like this. And I'm going to try to start doing the same guest interaction. I don't know, you guys that are on the paid side, but I thought it was fun. Like I had Cody Donnelly, who used to guide for me. I actually ran into him years ago as a DIY just backpack hunter. I ran into him up in the mountains. He started guiding with me. We were competing at that time. He was doing his own hunts and I was guiding in that area. I ran into him and have worked for him for years. And I had him on the paid side. We did an interview about like cold weather. Well, maybe not winter camping, but in terms of the fall hunting seasons, we talked about third and fourth rifle season, the opportunity there, particularly for a backpack hunter. And he's done a lot of that, so it was cool to have him on. I'll try to do some of that for the broader group too. So I appreciate all the activity on the membership group, guys. So thanks for all of that. It's fun to see it grow. I've had a few people ask me this. Right now, I have both knives are in stock. Mike, the guy who creates them, is actually on the stream. I saw that, and I'm sure he would answer questions for you guys also. But if you have any questions on the knives, I think I'm getting pretty close on the skinny knife. But Mike's in the process of making me some more, so they're around. And then I'm getting good feedback on the sharpeners. I feel like the last iteration of them is like incrementally improving every time I do a run of them. But that last one, I used it all through the spring bear season. I really liked it. So if you guys have any questions about that or whatever, just let me know. And then in terms of fall season stuff, yeah, so online courses, the fall bear course is on the group. You can, on my website, guys, pursuitwithcliff.com. If you go to the online courses part of the menu, it'll take you to those courses. So the fall bear one is like 90% done. I think I had a couple modules left. The elk one has probably got twice as many hours of content as the fall bear course, but it's probably only about 50% done. There's a bunch of good stuff on there, and it should all be out basically here. Should be before the 1st of September. I'm jamming to get it all done. So go check out those courses. Alrighty, so let's do some rapid fire. And on the questions there, when is the podcast with Pedro? So I did the podcast yesterday with him. Should be out. I think it should be out next week, probably at the end of next week. And it was good. He's an interesting guy. I tried to dig into, a lot, like kind of his background and how he got into it, because it's kind of amazing the amount of hunts that Pedro does. And just so you guys know, what I'm talking about is, it was just brought up in the chat there. I interviewed Pedro, and I always butcher his last name, Ampuro. It's a Spanish last name. He was in Spain when we did the podcast, but he does a bunch of adventure hunts. They're on his YouTube channel, and he seems to be getting some traction lately. Fun guy to interview, kind of a little bit different than what I typically do on those podcasts, so I had fun with it. Seems like a good guy. He's been a lot of places. It's pretty wild. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, so rapid fire. So Britton sent me a question. What do you recommend to be successful in base camp hunting in Colorado? It seems like many people are backcountry backpack hunting now. So what I would say with base camp hunting, and I'm assuming, Britton, that you're talking about, like road-based stuff, that sort, or some variation of that. And what I would say first is that you can be just as effective as a backpack hunter in Colorado. You just have to view that your advantage is the mobility, and really this goes for all elk hunting and most of the units we're talking about in Colorado, and that's that you gotta figure out a strategy to find the elk as quick as possible, hopefully quicker than the folks you're competing with, because that's like the whole name of the game, right? So if you're base camp hunting, the advantage you have is some mobility, right? So what I would say about that, where base camp hunting doesn't work all that great, is in order to be mobile and like go to different glassing spots, cover different ground from a road-based camp, you got to be in pretty damn good shape. So I actually view it that you need to be in better shape than the backpack hunter, because the backpack hunter is not necessarily going to have to hike 3 hours every day to get to that prime time glassing spot or whatever, where he's going to be able to maximize what he can see to find elk in the first 3-4, however many days it takes you on the hunt to find the elk. Whereas if you're base camp hunting from a road, you're going to need to be able to do that, because you're going to be looking to hunt. You want to hunt that buffer that's like, a half mile to 3/4 from the road, basically like earshot from the road. There's elk around there all the time, that don't get hunted that much. Basically like 3/4 of a mile of a road from a road back to like, let's say 3.5, 4, 5 miles, right? Because after 5 miles in a lot of Colorado, you're going to run into a lot of outfitting pressure. And the other thing you're going to run into is you're going to run into the backpack guys, right? The backpack guys that are already back in there, they're already in the back of basins or whatever. So why would you work to go back in there and compete with them? So I just think you got to have that mindset. One, be in damn good shape. To me, it's the style of hunting that being in really good shape is going to pay off the most, because doing it day after day after day, going to new spots, finding new elk, using your mobility to your advantage, it takes a lot of physical fitness. So I said I was going to do this rapid fire, and look at this, I already spent like 5 minutes on that one. Let's see here. All right, I'll take Mitch's from the chat here. Headed back to the same unit as last year, opening day. Would you start by packing 8 miles in after the elk I located deep last season, or hunt closer spot that shows a ton of fresh sign right now? So what I would if there's like slimy green shit right now, I would say go hunt that spot. There's no point in packing in 8 miles. Kind of referring back to the first question I answered for Britton. If you're packing in 8 miles, it can be you're giving up your mobility. And if you have elk like right there nearby, you can retain your mobility and hunt somewhere where if you're seeing fresh slimy green shit, then you know the elk are there. And this alludes to some other questions that are down the road. I guess I have to adjust this a little bit, Mitch, because when you say sign right now, you're talking like right, this is like here in July. So I guess I have to rephrase my thought. If you can find sign right before you hunt, then do what I just said. The sign you're seeing right now is really really probably not that valuable, right? The only your July sign, where you're finding elk, where you're finding groups of bachelor bulls, for the most part, it's really easy to find bulls this time of year, pretty much everywhere, right? I have guys sending me pictures of going on hikes and seeing elk all over, and even in over-the-counter stuff that's pretty hard to hunt. So you'll see them. And so now I got the context of first rifle too. So what I would say, like right now, what you're seeing is irrelevant, Mitch. I guess I'll answer this because I was going there anyways. For you guys that are archery hunting, like the first week of archery or whatever, if you're finding, good sign the week before the season, those bulls will probably be there like the first week of archery, and then it'll be back to them just pinballing around. But there it's useful. So I hope that wasn't too convoluted, guys. Kind of when I first read Mitch's question, it was I kind of took it in the context of like like he's hypothetically hunting right now. He's got fresh sign, but he knows of a spot where there's elk back in there. So hopefully that all made sense. Yeah, Sam, on tips on solo archery calling. So yeah, my biggest tip, I'll be rapid fire on this for solo archery calling, is so there's this scale, right? Like as archery hunters, we're out there. I think if we're being honest with ourselves, there's a scale of like, do I try to call this bull in, or do I try to spot and stalk bulls almost completely, right? So where are we going to fall on that spectrum? And I think that when we're in pairs, I think that we have a little bit of an advantage in the sense that the way we can set up, it's much more likely that the setup is going to be successful when we're pairs, because that bull is going to be keyed in on the caller. He's not necessarily going to be keyed in on the shooter's position. I'm sure if you've looked up kind of solo archery hunting, this is like one of the most problematic things when you're solo archery hunting, that a bull has got like your location pinned. And when they hear you, they're not like us. Like I'm sitting in my house right now and I hear one of my kids, talk or, drop something or whatever. I don't really even know what room they're in the house, right? I just know that they're like, oh, they're in the northeast corner of my house, like that quadrant of the house, and we're talking like within 50 yards of me or whatever. An elk, in their world, they know like what piece of furniture the kid's leaning against right now, right? That would be like the metaphor or the analogy, right? When you make a sound, you crack a branch, you cow call to them, you bugle to them, they know the exact tree you're next to. Like they know like the exact spot. So that's what hurts you as a solo archery hunter. So because of that dynamic, I think the spot and stalk becomes a much more, you should tilt towards that when you have the opportunity to. If you can, as a solo archery hunter, if you can just get in there and kill one with spot and stalk, that's going to be like, it's going to get a little priority over versus if you were hunting with a partner. So that's one of my biggest tips. The other thing, Sam, is like if you do get in situations where you are calling bulls in and you're solo, try to minimize your calling as much as possible so you can kind of weaken that idea of like, when they show up, they already have you pinned down. And the other thing is really consider being aggressive when you have to, right? In some like the one, often like you get a binary outcome, but it is what it is. If you're solo and you're in stuff where it's just like that, okay, this bull's going to come into this 50-yard wide meadow and I'm sitting over here, he knows where I'm at, I can't move or whatever. But I mean, basically the concept of like you're doing your last call and then moving rapidly to catch him as he approaches. I mean, it's a binary outcome. You're either going to bust them or cows with the bull is going to bust you or whatever. But when you're solo in certain types of setups, it's like your only option, right? So you basically make your last noise and then try to bum rush them and get as close as possible. And then when they pop up to look at that point where they heard the call or they heard you raking or whatever, you're ready to shoot them, right? So it's just a modification of like the pairs. All right, so I'm gonna get off the chat for a second, guys, and just go back to the some of these questions I have here, and I'll come back to the chat. All right, what is the best way? Tim had a question. What is the best way to get paid trespass permits to DIY hunt on private land in the West? Assume a non-resident with no prior connections to Indian landowners in the hunt area. Okay, so it's very difficult, honestly, Tim. I guess the quick answer I would give is never turn down opportunity to join a group that is hunting a piece of private land that they've got locked down with a landowner, or they're getting landowner tags from a landowner and a spot opens up. I see this all the time. Guys ask me about this all the time. You know, somebody has come to them and they 5 guys traditionally hunt this ranch, or 5 guys are buying, you know, cow tags or bull tags from this New Mexico landowner, and all of a sudden one guy can't hunt anymore, right? Or he can't hunt for a couple years for all sorts of reasons. Guys get older, guys get divorces, all sorts of stuff. And then those tags are offered to a hunting buddy, or, you know, some sort of like connection of a connection. And then guys ask me, well, do you think it's worth this? And what I would say, like in those situations, always tilt on, hey, I don't, it's hard to know until you do it, but the best deals come that way. All the landowner tags and trespass opportunities and that sort of thing in the West now, if they're public and they're out there, it tends to be a biased set of opportunities. There's no Zillow of private landowner tags or anything like that. If they're public, if they're getting advertised public, they're usually either way overpriced or they're not that great of an opportunity. I'm not saying that you can't find them that way, but it's a lot harder. So main thing is just take opportunities when they come, and don't fret it. Don't feel like you're getting screwed. Just, you know, just go with it and give it a try, and don't turn down those opportunities. I can say even personally, like all the opportunities that I've had like that I didn't do, I've probably regretted 99% of them. So that's one thing to think about. And the other thing is I mean, each state's different, and you know, it's some states technically you have to buy the landowner tags from the landowner. Colorado's like that, but there's like this gray area of like brokering tags that exists or whatever. So each state's different. It's kind of a weird dynamic, but just let people know you're looking. You know, let people know at you know, Epic Outdoors. Let people know at the Huntin' Fool. Let Jeremy with We Are the Draw. Like, let him know that you're looking for that sort of stuff. You just got to kind of put the word out and kind of network on it a little bit. Alrighty. Let's go back to the chat because I can see it popping off to the side here. Any tips? Okay, Matt has a question. Would it be advantageous to do an introductory call before a hunt with a pack-out service? What kind of questions or logistics do people overlook when thinking of getting a pack-out service? Yeah, so Matt, I'm assuming you're talking about packing meat out of the wilderness, like getting an outfitter to do it. All right, guys, in some of my content, you're gonna see that I've been using this chest holster from Invader Concepts. This is with my 10mm. I also use it with my Glock 19 and even a PMR 30. I'm gonna do a bunch of content here in the next couple months on that around bear defense. It should be interesting. It looks a little awkward to have your gun under your bino harness, but if you test out all the different variations, it is the best, and you have it on you all the time. I do have a discount code. It's CliffG, and it's for 10% off. Go check them out. So yes, I would suggest that you do talk to them. I talked about this briefly on some piece of content. Maybe it was another call, but you want to contact the outfitters in the area that you're hunting well before. Like if you're talking about for this year, like you should be calling them right now, because those guys are about to get crazy busy. Like they're going to start putting in all their wilderness camps and all that, and the chances of getting a hold of an outfitter that's working in an area that you're doing a DIY hunt and you want pack out, you know, you want to potentially use them for a pack out, it's getting where they're going to start getting busy. You're going to have a hard time calling them. So call them now. You know, next year call them in May and June and try to get them on the phone. And a couple quick pieces of advice on this, I've alluded to this before, and this comes from my years, you know, being an outfitter in these wilderness areas. Most guys are not going to encourage you to get way back in there and compete with them, right? And so you have to understand that if you're an archer and you call up an outfitter and they sense, and if it's the reality that you're deciding whether or not to do a certain hunt plan based on the availability of them being able and around to pack out the elk for you, they're going to discourage you from doing that because they're not going to create competition for themselves. But the other element that's more of a practical element in here is that they know there's this dynamic with elk hunting, all fishing, everything else. When it's good for one guy, it tends to be good for everybody, right? So in the outfitting business and packing out meat and stuff in the mountains during elk season, it's not like you get a steady trickle of packing out bulls when you're an outfitter. It comes in clumps, right? And everybody thinks like they're into the elk and they finally found the pocket of elk, and all of a sudden the elk are responding to calls. All of a sudden the elk just seem dumb or whatever, right? Everybody thinks they just figured it out all of a sudden. Well, it turns out like there's 6 spots on the mountain where that's happening, right? So when that happens, guys get busy. And so a lot of times, even if an outfitter in an area, he may just not be able to pack a bull out for you because he's just overwhelmed with what he has going with his booked clientele. So those are 2 things you have to consider. I would view getting an outfitter to pack meat out for you is a nice potential luxury, right? And it's worth doing the due diligence because it does help you. But if you're using it to extend your logistics as something that you for sure need, and otherwise you might have meat go bad or something like that, I'd be very wary of going down that route. And then when you talk to outfitters, that's, if you're like, hey, I'm going into this spot, XYZ spot, they're going to know, where you're going. I'd love to use your services if I get a bull down in there. I'm going to be with a couple buddies. I can get the bull out probably, it might just take me longer if I do it on my own or whatever. That frame to an outfitter is going to be a lot more welcoming conversation, right? They know you're going to go in there anyways. It's not like they feel like you're very dependent on them, and they're also not worried that they're basically creating competition that's not going to be in there otherwise, right? So hopefully that all makes sense, Matt. The last thing I'll leave you with on it is, in order to find who works an area, you got to go to the forest that you're going into. Colorado's got a bunch of different forests. It's got the White River, it's got Pike, it's got all these different forests. Figure out the wilderness area, what forest it's in, and then there'll be a ranger district within that forest, and then you want to get that office. So let's say you're hunting, I don't know, 35 in the Vail Valley, right? Well, the closest office is the Mid-Turn U.S. Forest Service office. You call that office, you get that number, you call, and you ask for the special use permit administrator. That's the person you want to talk to, and they'll tell you who works that specific drainage or whatever. So hopefully, and those people, if you can get them on the phone, they're a wealth of knowledge on a lot of fronts. All right, let's see here. So hopefully that makes sense. If you guys have any questions on that, or if any of that seems like kind of jargon, just let me know. Okay, do legal bulls start to seem picked over, less of them during 3rd and 4th rifle in units with a lot of early pressure? Yeah, so Tim, I'm guessing you're kind of alluding to that conversation that I think you probably listened to, or you were on the call that I did with Cody about 4th rifle season. And so I understand the dynamic that you're talking about, and that's like, do all the legal bulls basically get picked through in a unit? And I think there's a couple things in that thought process that make it a whole lot less relevant probably than what you're used to. So these elk will go a really long distance between archery 1st rifle to 4th rifle, like 10, 15 miles, 20 miles. They'll be on, they'll be 7 drainages away rutting, and then they'll show up during 4th season, in your neck of the woods, right? So there's some of that mitigates, what you're talking about. One thing that I'll add to the 4th season element, like the late 3rd season and 4th season, we're kind of there's two elements that are going on when you're hunting bulls that time of year. Like you're doing the post rut thing, you're finding little honey holes of them that they always go to historically, but you're also sometimes dealing with migrating elk. Like they're even leaving those little holes up high because you got enough snow. Like the stuff I was talking about with Cody. I mean, he's hunting November 20th. Most of that high country, like snow's starting to move elk too, right? So you can get fresh elk at any time in one of those pockets, and in general, they're not going to be picked through. My opinion is that one of the, although we always complain about the crowding and seeing orange vests and hats all over during the rifle seasons in Colorado and these other states that have ample tags, there's in these wilderness areas, roadless Forest Service areas, even just forests in general, the hunting distribution is not even remotely close to like evenly distributed, right? It's got little pockets of it, and it's hard because if you're backpack hunting or if you're even if you're day hunting, off the road, but you're going really hard, it seems like you're covering a lot of ground. You don't unless you've flown these big wilderness areas or you've ridden like hundreds of miles on a horse. You don't realize that there's always pockets that have no people in them, and sometimes there's reasons that people don't go in there, and they could be very logical reasons that have nothing to do with like toughness or remoteness or any of that. It's just that it's like, I mean, an example would be go in the Unit 44 in Colorado, super famous mule deer unit, but let's talk about elk in it, right? Like go look in the high country in that unit, and it is just dark timber for miles. There's a huge chunk of it you're not going to hunt, or it's very hard to be effective in at all. And the elk in there in those pockets, they don't ever get hunted during late archery, first, second, third. They're just not getting hunted, and then they get pushed out of there because of the snow, and they show up in spots. And it's not that those groups of bulls have actually even been, they literally, even though they're in an over-the-counter unit, they haven't got hunted at all yet until like end of third, into fourth season. So you'll see that a lot. I guess to follow up on that question, Tim, I have seen it. I have seen what you're talking about. Like basically herds of elk getting picked through by those late seasons. And the years it happens is when there's really early heavy snowfall. So if you get like a, I mean, I've had it where this would have been like maybe 10, 11 years ago. We were getting dumps of snow during first rifle, and I was like struggling to keep my camps in during second rifle. And a lot of the elk were moving out of the high country, by like the third, fourth day of second rifle. And the thing about how the quotas are in Colorado, you've got most units. Like if you guys are talking about like these big first rifle units that have all the leftover tags and that sort of thing, those where they cover a bunch of different units. Those kind of are like, they're kind of like pseudo over-the-counter rifle units, but they're still draw, so that mitigates the pressure a little bit. And then second and third gets hellacious amount of pressure, and then fourth season is draw everywhere for elk. So all of a sudden there's way less pressure, right? But if you get big snow that aggregates the elk by mid-second season, it can get like ridiculous in terms of just how easy it is to kill elk. And this is like a one in a decade phenomenon. But I have had years when I was outfitting where I almost felt bad because we were going back into elk and like big groups of elk that were pushed down, and we were just skimming them for legal bulls and killing every legal bull. I mean, every legal bull in there we would kill, and then we'd come in and just we're seeing just all the barely legal bulls, and that's all that's left. That can happen, but that's the dynamic. It happens. It's got to be like pretty extreme scenario where the hunting's just off the charts, and it's off the charts early. All right, so much for rapid fire. But here, you know what let's do, guys? Let's see here. Lots of good questions in the chat too. Let's do the giveaway on the Kafaru stuff. So Yeah, so Mitch, that's a good question. What do people mean when they say talk to a biologist? Any suggestion on how to get in touch with the right one in my hunt area? Guys, biltong, okay? I have been obsessed with this stuff for 3 or 4 years. Ever since I got on a keto, carnivore, paleo-esque type of diet, I've had a hard time finding healthy snacks. Biltong is a great option, particularly the slabs that have this fat on the side. That's where your energy is if you're a fat burner like me. Super simple ingredients in this, guys. Literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ingredients. Compare that to your gas station jerky. A great snack in the backcountry or just day to day. Biltong Depot is a huge supporter of my content. Go to their website, biltongdepot.com. Use my code CliffGray, CLIFFGRAY at checkout for 10% off and to support this content. Thanks, guys. Yeah, so Mitch, let me know. I assume you're talking, I think from the earlier question, you're talking about Colorado. So the best it depends a little bit on the region. And like, so there's certain regions where the biologist is very focused on the elk herd, very focused on the mule deer, very focused on the game animals. And then there's regions where that biologist isn't really, right? And they're also a little bit less interested in interacting with hunters. For instance, if you're in the Meeker area, that side of the flat top, so those units in the Meeker area, the biologist over there is very well known for being very dynamic with hunters. He's very elk-centric. He's obsessed with elk and deer. I don't know him real well personally, but I've heard very positive things from hunters. There's other regions you get over. I don't want to shit on any of them, but there's other regions where you're not going to get the biologist on the phone, basically. And if you do, they're going to give you a bunch of generic information. So you got to kind of play that. In those areas where the biologist is not going to be real hunter focused, even though it's supposed to be a part of their job, what you want to do is you want to contact the game warden. And they don't call them game wardens in Colorado. I can't remember what the term for them is, but the best way to do it is I feel like an idiot because I've been for so many years, but I forgot what the term is. But if you call up the office and ask for a game warden, they'll know who you're talking about. The best way to get a hold of the game warden that you actually want to talk to is, again, it's kind of analogous to the Forest Service deal. You don't want to call up the regional CPW office in Denver or Colorado Springs or Pueblo, because you're never going to get to the right person, and you'll probably end up in some voicemail box that doesn't help you all that much. You want to call the closest Fish and Game office to where you're hunting. So let's say you're hunting 43, right? Unit 43, right? Down there, right by Glenwood. I'm visualizing this in my mind. So let's say you're 43 or 34, right? They're both across the highway. Glenwood Springs is in between them or whatever. I think I've got that straight in my mind. But there's a CPW regional office right there off of the highway between Glenwood and Rifle. It's like right in the dead center. If you call them, I promise you that you're going to get somebody there. May not be the first call, maybe the second call. You're going to get somebody that interacts with the wardens that works those units every day. Like that warden comes in the office every day, or most days, and that front office person, the receptionist, whoever answers that call, they interact with that person. They interact with Brian. They interact with Dan, whatever, right? And they're going to make sure that Dan gets your message. And then it may take a couple times to get a hold of them, but eventually they'll call you back. Again, it's one of those things. About this time, getting into August, they start getting really a lot of phone calls, and your hit ratio on talking to them goes way down. Yeah, district wildlife manager, exactly. Mitch, good one. Yeah, that's who you're looking for. Those guys can give you a decent. Well, it depends on the individual. They're not going to give you any hot tip, right? But they could give you some good information on the unit that you may not anticipate, right? They can tell you roads. that they have to deal with people stuck on all the time. If you ask them about certain ranches, you're going to hunt a certain border, a certain public-private land border. If you ask that game warden, or excuse me, that district wildlife manager specifically, I'm going to hunt the northwest side of XYZ ranch. Do you got any thoughts on it? Are there any trouble areas? Do you got any thoughts on that region? Generally, they're not going to be real positive, on this specific line of questioning, because this is where they have to deal with a lot of conflicts. But it's a very valid way to hunt a lot of the western states is to hunt on these private public land borders. But when you ask specific questions like that to these guys, you can garner a lot of very useful information. You know what I mean? And you can read into that as much as you want, right? They can say, oh man, that landowner is not very hunter friendly. If you get game that goes into that ranch, you're not going to be able to recover it. So there's things like that. But then you can read into those conversations to be like, they're like, oh man, that corner, I have tons of conflict there. And in your mind, it's like, okay, I need to understand that there's a corner there that's conflict oriented. I need to be careful of that as a hunter, but also I'm getting information of the fact that there's conflict there because there's a shit pile of elk and deer there. You know what I mean? So that's the kind of questioning where you're going to get really useful information from biologists, district wildlife managers, game wardens. You got to kind of have like very specific questions, and some of them are useless. Some of them are very helpful. There's a spectrum of things. Wow, I didn't expect a winner to have the same last name as mine. Congrats. Dude, it is the exact same last name. So that's funny, and I couldn't pronounce it right, but you're right that it's like, so I must have gotten close on the pronunciation. All right, so Chase, nice to see you, Chase. Let's see here. First time fourth rifle elk hunter here. Any advice on successfully transitioning the style of hunting from, say, archery and first and second rifle? Yeah, Chase. I do, and I don't think you're on the private side of the membership group. But I did this call with Cody. I'm gonna have Cody on. I'm gonna do a podcast with him. It might be a few weeks because I'm just like jammed up right now. But listen to that podcast, because he has a lot. He's done it a lot, and I don't know if you're backpack hunting or what your plan is, but particularly if you're doing anything remote, like the stuff that he can provide be very useful to you. I haven't hunted. I've hunted a lot of third and fourth rifle season horseback. So going remote on horseback and like fourth rifle season is my favorite time to hunt elk, without like hands down. There's lots of different reasons. But yeah, I guess it's not great like tips and tricks, but I would say be on the lookout for that deal from Cody. And then when I get it out, I think it'll be very useful to you. Some general advice on fourth season is when you're elk hunting fourth rifle. I think you're local to Colorado, I think too, Chase. I would say one of the huge advantages you can hunt. So a couple things to think about. You can hunt all day typically because elk will be pretty active. Unless it's like a unseasonably warm or dry year, you're going to see a lot more activity out of the elk, so you can hunt them a little bit longer and use tracks to your advantage. So two things there, right? Like actually being out there finding tracks, like right there in your vicinity, but also really focus on glassing tracks, because glassing tracks will give you an enormous advantage. This is of course like snow oriented, right? But fourth season, almost most of the places that we're hunting, like you can depend on that in a lot of spots. So I would say, focus on those two things. There's lots of huge advantages, right? The huge negative is obviously just like, you're from Colorado, at least if I recall, I think you're from Colorado. And you're back. So backpack hunting, man. It's just freaking cold, dude. So it's just really cold. So you gotta power through that. But there's some great opportunities, particularly for a resident. And those are the downsides. The downsides are it's freezing cold. If you're a backpack hunter, like it's a real deal thing. You got to keep in mind some things. Cody talks a lot about like water and those sort of things, and the difficulties around that. Just winter camping stuff, right? And the other thing is if you're backpacking very far and you're doing other backpack hunting, just realize that your gear, the weight of your pack is you're gonna add on probably another, depending on like, you know, how your current setup is. Most guys add another 25 pounds to their pack versus their archery backpack setup. So those negatives, right? Just the discomfort of those components. Everything else is a giant advantage. Finding elk's easier. Typically, you got the snow. You don't have to worry about temps in terms of processing elk. Elk are generally more concentrated. Meat comes out way cleaner because you're usually dealing with it on snow. So, and there's a bunch of other advantages too. So, yeah, for sure, Chase. Let's see here. Okay, John had a question here. I've heard hunter harassment stories about hunting near certain ranches, including ranches using helicopters to chase elk back onto land. Yeah, so John, I don't doubt that this kind of shit happens. I will say that it is way overplayed. There's just not there's not that many guys that are like hazing elk back onto their private ranch. I mean, there's a lot of like practical implications of why a lot of these stories are bullshit. But there are a lot of ranches, and every year across the West, more ranches go from working cattle ranches, really a dynamic that dislikes elk. I grew up on a cattle ranch when I was a kid, and elk were not a good thing. Sure, my dad was outfitter, guided. Elk were a good thing during hunting season. The rest of the year, they were not a good thing. And even in hunting season, it was like a moderation thing, right? So, what you're seeing in the West is you're seeing a lot of ranches shifting from that to purely elk hunting ranches. So what's happening and what has created a lot of frustration for the public is a lot of ranches are right at the base of a mountain range, right at the base of a huge wilderness, and they are holding a resident population of elk now year-round. And part of that is that there's tons of resources for the elk there because these ranches have reduced how many cattle they have on the place. And the other component is everything about how that ranch is managed outside of hunting season and during hunting season is about keeping those elk there. So how they hunt it is a lot of these ranches, how they hunt them is very meticulous, right? And that keeps the elk on there more than anything. Are there these cases where landowners are dickheads? Yeah, for sure. Like, it happens, but I think it's a lot less than people think. There's one dynamic. Well, so I guess to complete the thought on it, if you see stuff like that, almost all states have a very strict set of rules that are clear about it being illegal, right? Particularly hazing any wildlife is illegal. I think almost everywhere. But so and then hunter harassment is too in most places too, or at least there's a set of rules around it. So those are things that are there to protect like public land DIY guys that are on the public land hunting. There's a dynamic that is important to understand, and that's that state by state, not all states are the same about animal recovery. For instance, Colorado, the landowner has no obligation to let you recover an animal, even if you've got a blood trail from the public and the bull's jumped over the fence and is now literally laying there 50 yards dead on the private. They don't legally have to allow you to get that animal, so there's something to think about. I don't want to talk about this for the next hour. I could, but the private, hunting private land, public land borders is a very good strategy. I've done it a lot myself. There's little nuances about it. I should say it's a very good strategy to kill elk, to be highly successful. The negative is it brings in an element that can take away from the hunt, and that's like a stressful, anxiety-inducing element, right? We all have Onyx, we all have all these good tools now, but when you're really effective at hunting borders, you're always like, I just did that video on planting stalks and stuff, ranging elk, marking them on my map and knowing exactly where they're at. Applies that same sort of tactic. You got to be a freaking pro at that, because you got to be able to see a bull and know that he's on the public. Like right now, he's on the public. Boom. Now he walked 30 yards. He's on the private. Now he walks back 50 yards. Boom. I see him. He's on the public. See that this stuff like it's not a fun. Most people don't view that as fun because it's somewhat stressful, but it can be very effective. I guess what I'm getting at within that is this is an element, like if that's your strategy, it's good. It is good to talk to the wardens and kind of know. I mean, in Colorado in particular, a lot of them will tell you what landowners will 100% not let you on their property, which ones won't. One last piece of advice on that: if you hunt private land borders, make sure if you are in a situation, fence lines and all that. Again, there's a bunch of different rules around that. Just because they're on the public side of the fence doesn't mean they're on public, right? And in different places, that matters. In some places, it doesn't matter. Like where the line is doesn't matter if there's a fence, doesn't matter if there's no trespassing sign on this side, but the bull is standing there outside of the fence, but turns out the property line is like out here and the fence was built inside. Varies on the state, right? So you have to know exactly where they're at, and it's very important to do that. But if you ever run into an issue where you wound an animal, and this can happen, you could be 2 miles in the wilderness and kill a bull on the side of a hillside and he runs down and ends up on a ranch, right? 2 miles away, like it happens. The best piece of advice I can tell you is, unless it's very clear, there's somebody there to talk to or whatever, your best bet, hands down, is to talk to the local game warden first. Usually you're not the first guy that's had a wounded animal go on that ranch, and they're going to know how to maneuver that situation in general better than you are. They're going to have had some interaction with that individual. They're going to, they're going to know how to maneuver it best. One of the worst things you can do is, the worst thing you can do is hop over the fence and try to drag it back. Because another piece of advice I can tell you is that, particularly hot spots of public land, private land borders, the guys on the private, when they hear a gunshot, or even if they hear bulls bugling and are right on the border and it's archery season and all of a sudden things go silent, like these guys kind of know what's going on. They'll show up out of the blue, right? Because, because again, hunting is such a big part of these ranches. So don't ever break the rules and try to just like get it over real quick, right? It doesn't work. It's a bad train of thought, and it's very tempting for people. But anyways, call the warden, do that thing. The second worst thing you can kind of do is, go just start going on this ranch trying to find the owner, right? Driving, down their mile private driveway and showing them on their door and knocking seems rational. A lot of times it's not the best path. If you can, try to get a hold of a warden to have them as an intermediary. Sometimes you can't. You just got to go, knock on doors. But anyways, got off sidetracked there. Let's see what else we got here. Okay, Colton, best strategy for hunting elk midday in thicker timber. Afraid to bump them out of the beds if they aren't talking, not sure where they are exactly. Yeah, I mean, in that situation, Colton, like generally, particularly elk that get hunted a lot, they got the wind protecting them. They're in there for a reason. The best thing to do is not hunt them in thick timber. You know what I mean? Guys ask me the same question in rifle. Best way to kill elk out of thick timber in rifle. Some guys will still hunt them. Depends on the vegetation. Depends on the winds in the area. If you got soft, powdery snow on the ground, you can be, dead quiet. You can do that. Some guys will, still hunt timber really slow, cow call once every 10 minutes, just looking for a bull or a cow just to stand up when they hear a cow call. Keep your wind right the whole time. There's little ways to do it, but hands down, rifle hunting, the best way to kill bulls out of the timber is to drive them out of the timber. Not a real popular tactic nowadays, but it's the best. Archery, it's a lot of times just impossible. And all you're going to do is kind of screw up the situation if you push it. Yes, thoughts on tree saddle hunting in thick timber areas. Seems like you're somewhat mobile and can be in one place in the morning and hit water midday. Yes, so tree saddle hunting. What I would say is it's been underutilized. Guys are starting to figure it out. I think it's going to be pretty I think in 5, 6, 7 years it'll be super popular in the West. I think a lot of guys are already killing elk out of tree saddles in these areas, I think they'll continue. I think it'll continue as a very viable tactic. There's lots of lots of reasons why that will be the case. I think it's just, how many guys just for the last like 50 years have been coming out west who are whitetail hunters, and they think to themselves like, okay, now I'm 4 or 5 days into this. I kind of see where the elk are going. I know the whole routine. Man, I wish I had a tree stand in that specific tree. Well, now, with this new trend, they can do it, and they're going to start doing it. And I think that, from what I've seen from guys and heard from guys, it's already pretty effective. So yeah, I think it's a great approach. All right. Yeah, for sure, Tyson. Take it. I think for sure it's a viable way to hunt elk. 100%. All right. Let's see here. Mark sent me a question. Oh yeah, this is a little controversial one, I guess, but I guess I'll answer it live to get myself in trouble. What is your take on the failed public land sale in the budget bill? I do very few endorsement deals, and I do no paid reviews because it would affect the type of content, quality of the knowledge I could put out. So an important part of my business model is my membership group. There's paid and free options. I do a weekly live stream there. There is a thriving community of folks that are helping everybody become a better outdoorsman. It doesn't matter if you're a beginner or if you're an expert, there's something there for you. Go join, guys. It helps me out a ton. It's the way to support this content and to support me. I'll see you there. All the info is at pwchuntsquad.com. Yeah, so first off, like everybody else in the hunting community, or I guess 99.9% of people in the hunting community, I'm happy it was removed. Really it was more about the structure of that land sale. And when I say that, I'm not saying that I'm for the sale of public land in any other form, but I'll have to get into this a little bit. The fundamental problem with that is that, or with the sale of public land from my point of view in the budget bill, is it was going to benefit few, and it was at the cost of what I would call like a forever asset, right? For sure, the way it was structured, there's very little, there'd be very little argument to say that, like, probably, very likely, a few individuals were going to benefit from it, right? And we were going to be giving up something that, hopefully Americans have forever, public land. Now, I can't, this topic is always one that I'm very hesitant to dive super deep into, because I'll tell you guys an observation. There are a lot of guys out there with big, broad audiences in the hunting community and beyond who talk a lot about federal land management, and they know it at a very seasonal, one activity, their month in the woods hunting level. They've never worked with federal land managers. They've never dug like really deep into it. It's never been a big part of their life. Through my life, I've dealt with dozens of people in the hunting world, the outfitting world, the livestock world, the logging world, who a huge chunk of their existence is dealing with federal land managers. And I can tell you that a huge proportion of those people, I would almost say that they've been radicalized by the ridiculousness of that interaction, and how business is done with federal land managers. I cannot tell you anybody who actually has worked with them day to day in that capacity, from like an actual like land usage / like looking at how they manage land relative to analogies out there, or analogous places in other places. And you can look at Canada, you could look at private land manager, all sorts of different analogies. They suck at their job, like universally suck at their job. That doesn't mean I want it sold, but it's very hard for me, like seeing it from the inside. I mean, really my whole life, the Forest Service has been, I grew up listening to, my father deal with them. It was a huge point of stress in his life. It was a huge point of stress in my life the whole time I was an outfitter. And it wasn't, and it really, I can truly say, was not about, oh, outfitters just want more, loggers want more, cattle guys want more. It really wasn't about that. It was about a lot of other stuff that in the way that they do stuff. And I think that's my only thought on it there, that is maybe a little counter, I guess a little counter to some things, is it worries me, the whole discussion of it, because I think that people don't realize is there's like big fundamental problems that our federal land management has, and selling it is not the answer, but it needs to be fixed. And I can tell you, like, just as an example, I thought was interesting from my perspective watching this whole thing go down. So much support against it came out, which was a great thing to stop it. But things are happening on federal land that are very much benefiting very small segments of people and companies with gigantic lobbying power. That's happening now. You know, if you want to dive into this really deep, go into how Vail Resorts has developed the Vail Valley in Colorado. Like, really look at what they have done, really primarily by using a public resource, and look at it from the perspective, like, literally a lot of what they sell to the public is on public land with massive impact. And then also look at how they've leveraged that for their own benefit in terms of just all the real estate development and all of that around it, right? So I'll leave it at that. I'm very much pro keeping public land public. You know, I'm obviously a big fan of that, but I get these questions a lot because I think that I always come out with a little hesitation on it because I'm not a fan of how federal lands are managed now. And I'm intimately familiar with it. And I think a lot of the people out there who talk about it a lot, they're not intimately familiar with it at all. They have a very, very, very low level understanding of it, right? So anyways, my spiel on that I feel like this got, let's go back to elk stuff. All right, here, let's see in the chat here. Let's see here. What is the best state to apply for elk tags and consistently get them for a non-resident looking to do a DIY camp? Yeah, so really, Eric, your best bet is, really if you want to hunt pretty consistently, pretty consistently, I would say you got two options, Idaho or Colorado. If you're looking to only hunt every 4 or 5 years, I think that I think that Wyoming is a great opportunity for you because the general tag, it's interesting. I think it's almost the terminology. I think when people hear general tag in Wyoming, they kind of think it's somewhat like an over-the-counter tag in Colorado, and it's like night and day. You know what I mean? Like their general tag hunts are way better than over-the-counter hunting in Colorado, or way better than like a quota tag in Idaho that you probably can get if you jump on the phone early, right? Like those general Wyoming tags are way better, but they do take you 4 or 5 years. So it kind of depends on where you want it up. If you want to hunt every year, Idaho, Colorado is your best bet. Yeah, Chase, thanks, man. Let's see here. Okay. Okay, Scott had a question here. Went to the reservoir today and paddled my kayak on a windy day. It was super valuable to paddle up and drift down with the wind, watching how the trees and brush moves in the chutes. I was able to float about 1,000 yards 3 different times. It does help to think of the air like water. Yeah, and I use that. I use that a lot in my material. I think it is. Smoking a doobie helped also, seeing the air like the water. So yeah, I would guess that probably would, Scott. But so yeah, I always use that. What Scott's alluding to is I think that these metaphors sometimes help us a lot to understand these concepts. And one that I use a lot of times is when I'm thinking about the air in the mountains, or excuse me, the wind in the mountains. I try to visualize it as water moving through the topography, and that really does help you get at least a decent idea of what that what the wind's actually doing. Like, what's the wind doing when it turns that corner? You look at that canyon, like it gets real tight around the corner. Well, it's just going to have that kind of, I think it's like the Venturi effect, maybe bastardizing that or whatever, but it's tighter, so all of a sudden that water's going to move faster through there. That wind's going to move faster through there. I think that's I think that's a really good way to think about it. I think the other part of this question or statement that Scott had was, I think it sounds crazy, guys, but we all can't hunt very much, really, right? We can't be in the field all that much if you really think about it. I mean, I'd put myself in that category, and I do it for a living, right? I'll go guide for 100 days this year, something like that, 90, 100 days, but it's still only like a third of the year. So there's all this other time that I'm, on my computer or whatever. Normal guys, it's even more so, right? The majority of their time you're at home. But I do think that because we have ample amount of time on that front, and I think a lot of times it manifests in an obsession with gear, an obsession with e-scouting. That's how that it manifests, because it's something we can do with that time. I think that like visualizing things is actually super helpful. Just like literally thinking about it. It's like I just put up that video on shot placement on elk, and that app I show. It's like a $4 app or something. Like I said in the video, like I have no connection with it. I don't get any like financial incentive or whatever. But it's an app that shows the anatomy of the elk, right? And then you can shoot arrows into the elk. And people, like, I've seen lots of comments. I even got an email like busting my balls about how the developer, the heart is actually slightly ahead of where it is on the anatomy or whatever. I mean, honestly, I don't know that that's actually the case. A couple guys put out YouTube videos where they necropsied a bull laying on its side, and the heart was like a little bit forward, right? Like more forward than is depicted in that anatomy, really depicted on any like visual perspective of an elk walking around, right? Like, oh, the heart's actually a little bit forward. Well, I mean, the reality is, guys, like once an animal's dead, you cut the side of it off and then look at the anatomy. Like what you're looking at is not the reality of the animal walking around, right? The lungs are deflated. There's gravity pulling hard. I don't know who's right on it, but I'm saying like you got to kind of take it all with a grain of salt, including the app, right? It's pretty damn close to anatomically correct. Okay, I guess that's what I'm saying. But the point I was going to make is that there is real value in just visualizing the arrow going through there, moving the elk to a different angle, shooting an arrow through it, visualizing the path that arrow took, then looking back at like how the animal was angled. Like those mental exercises, although they're not being out in the field doing something, I think they do have value. And this made me think about it, Scott's message here, because he's floating down the river, paddling his kayak, but he's taking the opportunity to observe what the wind's doing, right? And going, oh yeah, it does move like water, like I'm watching. These things, I think they make you a better. I think they make you a better hunter, right? If you just are diligent about in your day-to-day life observing things that could help you when you're hunting. Like another thing that I do all the time is I'll go on a hike with my kids or whatever, and it could be in like a suburban area or something. I'll be looking around like, hey, if I had to take a shot right now, what would I use to take the shot? What would I go to the fence post? Would I go to the tree? Would I try to get into that stout oak brush and try to do something there? Like what options do I have on a rest? I do that all the time. I know it may sound insane, but it's not. It doesn't take any effort at all. It's a fun exercise. And the visualization, you do it a lot, and it for sure helps, I think. Absolutely. All right, let's see here. Let's see. Yeah, I visualize myself successfully hunting all the time, no different than any athlete winning a race. Perfecting that perfect shot. Yeah, for sure, dude. I think it's a real thing. I think for sure it works. Yeah, dude. And I'm sorry, man. I can't pronounce your first name, but I'm not even gonna say it, but the last RLP, I'll call you RLP, man. I really like the videos from Anatomy Hunter. His stuff is very informative. Dude, that guy's stuff keeps popping up on my the content that I see, you know, too, on my phone. I think the guy's stuff is awesome. I would imagine that he'll blow up. I mean, the guy's doing an insane amount of work, cutting those animals in half, remounting them, really looking at the anatomy. I think he's trying to. I think he's trying to. I think he's trying to very much do it right. Like, put the animal up. Like, where would these organs actually fall? Like, I think that's pretty. I think that guy's awesome, man. Yeah, and it's an Anatomy Hunter. Sershaw, got it, dude. Thanks, man. All right, what do we got here, guys? Yes, so Elijah says, shoot to hunt course takeaways. When shooting 9 to 10 shot groups, is it important to allow the barrel to cool for a specific duration between each shot? For a hunting rifle or a 223 trainer, I'm not sure how much the heat plays in the point of impact. Okay, so Elijah, on this one, and I've gotten into this one a little bit. So, couple thoughts on this. How I do it when I'm actually zeroing in a gun and I have a lot of time. I don't generally go to ranges. I don't like the feeling of the pressure and all of that. But you know, I'm lucky because most of the time I don't need to. I can just go to some public land or whatever and shoot. So I'm usually in an environment where I can take my time. I can shoot at my own pace, that sort of thing. So just to like take all the variables out of the equation, I like to shoot and then take quite a bit of time between each shot. And you'll see in my old videos, I talk about this in relation to barrel heat a lot. And I think that since some of those videos are 7 or 8 years old, I think that what I've come to realize is that, sure, some of it probably mitigated barrel heat, and maybe that was relevant, maybe it wasn't, but it also mitigated me being a bad shot. Just taking a break between every shot, you know, in those videos you'll see I talk about too, I'll dry fire a few times between each shot, hang out for a second, shoot again. So really, there's no chance of barrel heat being a massive factor, but also I'm taking away like the shooter being a giant factor either. But what I would say is that when they test this, it does depend on the gun, cartridge, barrel, all of that, but it's usually way overstated. It's not as big of a factor as people think it is, the heat on the barrel. And I think what people are what people actually are experiencing a lot of the time, and they're blaming it on barrel heat, it's actually them. So they've shot, I mean, they're shooting a 10-round group. They've shot 7 rounds out of their 7 mag, 300 Win mag, whatever. Recoil's getting to them, and they start getting flyers. Is it barrel heat? They reach down, grab the barrel. Barrel feels pretty hot. Maybe it's barrel heat. I think that comes into play quite a bit. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but I think that it's way overplayed. I guess in my mind, why not just be, if you got the time, you got the effort, why not just take a good break between each shot? You know, give it a few minutes, dry fire a few times, those sort of things. Okay, how would you know if you should have a frame pack or a basic day pack for hunting? I mostly hunt southeast hogs until I can move out west. Yeah, so what I would do for western hunting, if you have a day pack or a frame pack, you want to make sure either way, you want to make sure it's a day pack that's capable of packing out an elk quarter. So lots of brands make this kind of pack, like of this size and this kind of like a stiff enough frame. It's not like a frame pack like with a serious frame in it with stays, or you know, or a big kind of slat of a pack frame. But it's stiff enough that you could put a quarter in it. An example of this would be Kafaru's Shape Charge. You can look at the other companies. A lot of them have similar types of packs. That's a day pack that for me is very comfortable. If I've got 10, 15 pounds in it, I'm doing just, you know, long day hunts. all the way down to like even guiding out of a lodge or something where it's pretty low key. Like it'll cover all of that. But if I need to pack an elk quarter out with it, I can. So that if you do go the day pack route, I suggest you have something at least that beefy. The reality is that like if you're coming out west and you're not from Colorado, Wyoming, Idaho, or whatever, you probably, if you're only going to have one pack, you probably want to go with a frame pack, even though you are giving up the fact it's going to be a little heavier, it's going to be a little bit less comfortable than a day pack. But if you're coming out for those hunts, you kind of like the whole meat packing of elk can get really grueling without a frame pack, right? I know Tim's on here; he's done it. Like it's like you're gonna want a frame pack if you kill an elk, right? So there's some times when it might be more comfortable to have a day pack, but if you're coming out here just for that, and you're not like if you're coming out for a guided hunt and the guy's got horses and there's guys with frame packs there, then yeah, that's a different thing. But if you're thinking about going into the DIY deal, it doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter if you're road hunting, day hunting off the road, backpacking in. I think probably frame pack is like the single purchase, right? And then down the road, if you start doing a lot of day hunting while you're out there, you can have both. All right. Let's see here. Yeah, that's a good point. Air mattress pump in the barrel is easy cooling. Yeah, open the bolt and run the pump. Is 3-gun or any type of action shooting a good hunting prep activity? Yeah, I think any trigger time is good trigger time. You know, I mean, I'm only observing. I'm only observing what you know I have seen amongst all the clients I've guided, but guys that are familiar with firearms, just because they have trigger time, they tend to be more capable in the hunting situation too, right? Of course, this is all like relative. You know, there'll be people that say, oh, well, you know, PRS is a bunch of bullshit as it relates to hunting. It's like, okay, like what end of the spectrum are we talking about here, right? Are we talking about, you know, a guy who's been hunting for 15 years and he shoots his hunting rifle all the time and he's doing all these drills to get ready specifically for hunting? Are we comparing him to our PRS competition shooter? Yeah, okay, he's better. What he's doing is better for that single task. But I think really, usually what we're actually comparing is somebody who wouldn't shoot very much at all, just because they got other hobbies or whatever, versus somebody who competition shoots a lot and they don't get to really do like the whole hunting type of shooting that much, and then they go elk hunting, you know, once or twice a year. Yeah, that guy's gonna be pretty good. Like there's gonna be some transferable skills for sure. So I surely is not gonna hurt, and I think any trigger time is helpful. Yeah, I see that, Tim. Yeah, you'll have a frame pack next time, huh? Yeah, it sounds like Leo had the same deal. Okay, Dirk had a question. How long does an area need to rest after having been grazed by cattle and sheep? Let's see here, guys. 1 second. Okay. I had located a small honey hole on private land between double track trail and private. The access wasn't obvious or easy, so pressure was light. We had a couple great general hunting seasons, and now the rancher whose land borders the public has been leaving his sheep out longer than permitted. I'm certain he's doing this to help keep deer on his land for his customers. This last year, he pulled them out 2 days before the opener. Am I wasting time trying to hunt there if the sheep have only been out a week or less? Yeah, so my feeling with sheep, domestic sheep on the forest or on public land, is you got to kind of give it a couple weeks. They're super disruptive. I don't hunt near them if they're there, for sure. They run out game way more than cattle do, and it's not that I'm like anti, sheep rancher or whatever. It's just a dynamic that's different. They high density graze them. They usually have herders with them. Sometimes they have dogs with them. The sheep are moving around a lot. They're loud. and they just push the game out. And the other thing is with deer, cattle are grazers, sheep will graze, and they'll hit the browse. So the sheep will, when they come through an area, a lot of times they'll wipe out a lot of the browse that the deer were in there eating. So, that can be there. It's just a tricky domestic animal to hunt around. To me, 2 or 3 weeks is probably what you're looking for. But even then, to be honest, Dirk, like if all of a sudden if it's a small area and there's mule deer in there, or like a high density of mule deer, and then somebody's been grazing it, and maybe it's like a rotational permit. I have no idea, like on the specific situation. Maybe the guy's just breaking the law. I have no idea, right? Like, but all of a sudden there's sheep grazing that area. You have to consider that if the sheep are in there very long, they're eating exactly what the mule deer like to eat, right? So those little forbs, the little clovers, the young willows, those sort of things that deer kind of prefer to actual grasses, those sheep will have crushed them. You know what I mean? So they may never come back, or like during that season, or it may be like a year or two before they come back. So anyways, sheep suck. That's basically my takeaway for you on that. Let's see here. Justin said, what are some good ways to distinguish bugles from elk versus from hunters? Mostly location. So when you hear a bugle, if it's down on the trail, it's a hunter, right? If it's right on the ridge and there's a trailhead at the end of that ridge, it's a hunter, right? So that tends to be the biggest telltale sign. What I would say on this is that do not assume it's a hunter. What did my old driver's ed teacher? He used to say, "Assume nothing. It makes a ass out of you and me," like a play on the spelling or whatever. This applies to elk bugling. I can't tell you how many times, and you'll hear everybody say this. It's to the extent that it's almost like a cliche. I thought that bugle was so horrible. It had to be a hunter. Walked over that direction. Big giant bull busted me and ran off. Turns out he's just, the live bull was just a shitty bugler. Happens. They all have their own voices. Some of them bugle horribly. Some of them bugle epically, like Corey Jacobson, right? So it's just very hard to tell, usually by location, how they're moving around. Those other little variables are usually your best bet to figure that out. Let's see here. Robert says, is the gutless method the best method for elk? No. So it is, in most circumstances, given the other variables involved, it is the best method. But the best method for elk, the best method in my view for all species, is to get them hung up, skin them and quarter them hung up. It's the best. Obviously, it's kind of a ridiculous answer, but it's true. When you gutless animals, you do tend to you're going to have a little bit more waste. It's just a reality of that. You're not going to be your lighting's not as good typically when you're down. Like, you're basically boning out parts of the meat, in like strenuous conditions, right? So you're pulling the back straps off, and you've got a headlamp, and the bull's lopsided and crinkled up in there, so you don't get necessarily as good of a cut on it as you would if it was hanging or whatever. So there's those elements. Does it do a good job? Yeah, it does a pretty good job, and for sure, once you've done it a few times, you'll get really good at it. So all of a sudden, that difference in terms of waste, in terms of getting the meat off cleanly and all that, you'll get real good at it, and it'll get pretty close. When I started outfitting, there was another way that guys would do it, and that would be, a lot of guys would quarter them with an axe, so bone in, quarter them with an axe. Again, kind of like somewhere in between the two. It had some negatives. I mean, nobody's going to backpack elk out that way because you got all the extra bone, rib cage, everything else. Horsepacking, I always still wonder. I when I'm horsepacking nowadays, I still gutless method them, but is it the best? Is the old axe method better? I don't know. It's probably a toss up. Like hanging up, big axed quarters and then skin them back in camp, you probably get like a little bit better product. Gutting bulls. So I will say this: there's really no point in gutting a bull and then quartering it, because you're basically gutting the bull and then you're doing the gutless method anyways after the fact, right? So if you're going to go that route, just do the gutless method. Now, if there's any chance, like particularly guys that are hunting late season, hunting on the roads or whatever, you do want to know how to gut one, because it's nice to be able to just like gut one real good, gut it all the way up through the rib cage, get the trachea out, get the whole, get everything out of there, and then you and 3 buddies drag that puppy whole to the road. It happens, in certain hunts it happens a lot. So I would, know how to gut one. It's a good thing to know how to do, and it's also a good thing to do if you get jammed up and you get real late and you need to gut one and you need to come back and work on it the next day. A lot of guys will argue with me about this, be like, oh, there's no scenario where I would ever leave one. Well, shit happens. There's things outside of the hunt, pressure to get back to camp because there's no communication. People are worried, sick about you. Like, shit happens. And so you want to know how to gut animals in those conditions. I will tell you with elk, never gut them and then leave them on their side. Doesn't matter if it's freaking 30 degrees outside, 20 degrees outside. Don't gut one and then just lay it flat with like leg to leg, right? Like this, laying there, because there's so much heat that's in there. You want to try to get them on their spine, get them on their back, get them opened up. And one way that'll help you do this is go, where you've gutted them, go to the ball joints and basically semi-cut those rear quarters off. Go to the ball joint, cut in there, cut into that, in the thick of the meat right there, and pop it open so you relieve all that heat. And then the other component I already mentioned is always pull out all the trachea and all that crap if you can. So good to know how to do that stuff. Alrighty, let's see here. This one's out of the blue. I love it though. This was on Instagram. Pomata 56. Do you manage your own money or give the reins to a firm? Yeah. So I basically keep it pretty simple. I index my own money. My brother is a gigantic investment manager. I think he manages somewhere $10-15 billion now or whatever. So I do use some of his ETFs. I'll invest in some of those. But in general, I keep it simple. Index my own money. It's not something that I have much brain damage about, right? Keeps the fees down and all of that. I will say that I have to laugh a little bit, man, because I do have a finance background, but I guess I've been blessed in my life to miss out on making an enormous amount of money. So I'm probably not the right guy to ask financial questions, right? To the extent that how many opportunities I've missed in my life are it's almost hilarious, honestly. It's the only way I can think about it without crying, I suppose. But yeah, no, I just keep it simple, man. And I do think that that's a good strategy. Keep it simple, keep your fees low, don't sweat it too much. Market's pretty damn efficient. And this is funny because I got this question. This is from Mirza. Sorry if I'm messing up pronunciation. What's the best thing to look for when e-scouting for overlooked spots? So I'll just extend like the financial discussion, I guess, a little bit. So I think I'll use this analogy, right? I think that trying to e-scout for overlooked spots, you have to realize that it's all public data, right? So Onyx, awesome tool. Go Hunt, awesome guys, awesome tool. Tons of good data, but none of that data is proprietary. It's freely available to everybody. All those guys are doing is providing a nice way to look at it, right? They're just distributing the data in a user interface. It's very easy for people to interact with it, but anybody can get that data. And what's happened on e-scouting, draw odds, all of that is a fairly efficient market, yet people spend an enormous amount of time trying to look for like this overlooked spot on Onyx that nobody else has found. And the problem is by definition, if quantitatively you're looking at the data and it brings, like I could give you all this shit, right? I could say, oh, look at this grade of slope, and then look at this migration overlay, and then this vegetation. And there are guys that do this, and I'm I'm not saying there's no value, but I just got to give you my thoughts on this, right? You can do all that stuff, and you can e-scout your heart out, and you'll find spots. And because it's data that's available to everybody, and kind of the train of thought is always very intuitive, those spots that are screened that way and pop up, if they were overlooked at some point, they're no longer overlooked, because everybody that's got these tools is going to those spots. So the reality is, it's pretty impossible to find like a specific overlooked geographic spot, right? You have to discover those spots with some e-scouting, so you kind of, you get your logistics figured out with e-scouting. I think that's the primary value of e-scouting, to be honest with you, is logistics, glassing points, knowing what the vegetation looks like, those sort of things. I think that's really where the value is. The specific spots that you find that are truly overlooked, they are going to be things that you figure out only if you're there, right? So I go to this glassing point where I would imagine that I could see that little dog leg back in there, right? Because on Onyx, when I use Viewshed, it shows me I can see in there, all that. Well, I go to this glassing point, the only spot where I can see it, right? And it turns out that there's 80-foot, 150-foot ponderosa all along there. There's no effective way to glass it, right? Just because of the vegetation there. Okay, so now I'm looking around, looking more at my Onyx now that I'm in the field. I'm thinking, man, there's just no way to glass this unless I hike 1.25 miles up, 1,200 feet elevation. There's a little rock right there. I can jump on that rock. I can glass back in there, right? I can glass into that little dog leg in the back of that basin, and I can look for elk. That's how you're going to find those overlooked spots. It's kind of a combination of using the tools plus realizing that there's just things in the field that you're going to be able to figure out, right? And those are less likely to already be like discovered versus the stuff that just you screen down to in Onyx, right? I think the stock market analogy is kind of a good analogy, or metaphor, I guess is the right term. It's a good metaphor in the sense that regardless of the fact that we know everybody has it, and we know everybody's doing the same thing, we still will dwell on it for hours and hours and hours, thinking that we're going to create some sort of like real substantial edge, right? So don't mean to be a downer, but that's kind of my thought on it. And I guess that I shouldn't say that I'm being a downer at all. I think what it is an allocation of time and resources, right? I think that you have to realize the value of that and where you can get value out of it, and realize when you're kind of wasting time so you can focus on other stuff to become a better hunter or whatever. Alrighty, let's see here. Go back to the chat. Cliff's Hunter, I created this knife from iteration in the field. It has been modified and perfected for the backcountry use case. In terms of all-around knives, this is the last knife that an elk hunter, mule deer hunter, sheep hunter, goat hunter will need to buy. Go check it out on my website, pursuitwithcliff.com. In the top right, click shop, then Cliff's Hunter. All the details are there. Jacob has a question. For beginner hunters, if you were e-scouting for elk season, what are the 2 or 3 things you look for in a unit you're unfamiliar with? You pull up Onyx, find your unit. What are the first 2 things you look at? Water, cover, food, source, historical data, movement, migration data. What do you find most consistent to at least get you in the right area to scout on the ground? Yeah, so it's funny these 2 questions are together. So from 2 different guys. And so to what I would say again, I'll keep it simple here, Jacob. The key thing on finding a unit, and you can use Onyx for this as a way to dive into what you're looking at. The key thing when you're picking a unit for a beginner hunter is match your logistical capabilities and wants, right? Like how you want to hunt, be it via your vehicle or your side-by-side or your backpack or big day hunts because you're just a stud and you're in great cardiovascular shape or whatever, right? Match how you want to do it with the unit and who you're going to be competing with in that unit, right? So, for instance, let's say, and I'm pulling units off the top of my head, but I think they're roughly right. We're looking at something like unit a West Slope unit, 22 in Colorado, right? Oil and gas development all over it, roads all over it, roads that you can cover side by sides, right? All of that. If you want to backpack hunt or, do 5 mile a day, 7 mile a day, big long day hunts, you may not want to go to that unit, or you don't want to go to that unit, right? But if you're a 4x4 guy, you got a $30,000 side by side, that may be a good unit, because that's the kind of guy you're going to be competing with, guys like that, right? It doesn't mean that you can get away with just driving around the thing, like killing elk off the road, but you're going to be able to use your capabilities to go get to those little nooks and crannies. You're going to have to work for it a little bit, do some probably little pretty hairy, hikes, these little spots off the roads, go, use the road system, get up there, right up there, and hunt some of the public, private land boundaries. Like, you got to get creative. It's not like one's going to be way easier than the other, but you want to match what you're logistically capable of and how you want to hunt with the unit. That's the key thing, right? A lot of the other stuff, water, cover, food, historical data, movement, migration data, all that, in terms of picking units, if they're all in the same category of kind of how they're managed, in that kind of stuff, you're kind of splitting hairs at the unit level, right? Once you get into the unit, yeah, there's elky country, there's non-elky country, but even there, once you throw in like hellacious amount of pressure that you get in a lot of these western states that have really long elk season and they're just hunting the shit out of their elk, all that stuff doesn't matter. What matters is where they pinball around and they pop off of pressure and they end up in these little pockets. Sorry guys, the chat's like a little small for me, so I gotta squint to look at it. Okay, guys, I think this is gonna be the last one, but I'll run through. If you're dying for me to answer one, throw it in the chat right now. Let's see here. So from Instagram, Zach Nelson, would you use the new SIG spotter on a mule deer hunt? And this is, I think, he didn't specify this, but I'm pretty sure he's talking about the stabilized spotter. So I had that spotter for 2-3 months. I had it as a prototype. The quick answer to your question is no, I wouldn't. I need to test that spotter more. This is the image stabilized spotter, and I'll be brief on this part of my answer, and that's that I'm amazed how it amazes me how many people are out there like pushing that spotter already pretty hard, because there's no way that anybody could have got like enough hunting out there and exposed it to enough use cases to just generally love the thing, right? And I'm not saying I hate the thing, but I've used it enough to know that certain situations it's not good, or it's not advantageous. Other situations it's a very good tool, right? And so that's one of my thoughts, is that it's amazing to me there's so much content out there already that's just, there's some general like it's awesome, buy it type of stuff. Just an observation, I guess. But to answer your question specifically on mule deer hunts, I wouldn't take it. I mean, I don't have a lot of context here either, Zach, like if you're talking about like backcountry stuff or what, but in general, mule deer hunts, I'm glassing a lot, and I'm going to be carrying a tripod for the most part anyways on a hunt like that, because I'm going to be glassing for long periods of time, and that stabilized spotter that SIG has, even though you can handhold it, you're not going to handhold it for an hour while you glass giant big open country for mule deer. You're just not going to. You're going to put it on a spotter just for the convenience factor, right? Just to have it there so you're not like holding it like this, and so because of that, now you're carrying the tripod anyways. Why wouldn't I just carry a bigger spotter? Like, to me, the objective size for most Western hunting, it's too small, even if you're backpack hunting. It's a pretty small objective. I can't remember what it is, but I think it's sub 60 or something like around that, maybe 50 or 60 or something like that, but pretty small. And then I'm already having to carry a tripod, so bigger objective plus, like, dollar for dollar, if I take out the stabilization out of the SIG, I can take that same money and buy a better spotter for that application, right? And so that in that application, I'm not getting an advantage of the stabilization because I got the spotter on a tripod. And just so you know, I have tested this. I've tested a good spotter, granted, but a good spotter on a tripod, and then hand holding the SIG, and it's like the same on the stability front, right? The tripod does do 99% of what the internal stabilization does. There's guys argue about the wind and that sort of thing. I haven't noticed it that much. Now, granted, I do use like a pretty beefy tripod, but even if I take the SIG stabilized spotter, turn off the stabilization, put it on the tripod, I'm looking through it. When I turn on the stabilization, I really can't tell the difference. So basically, I'm carrying around that. If I already am carrying the tripod, I'm carrying around the stabilization too. Plus, I'm paying for a little bit lower quality glass relative because I'm paying for the stabilization, right? So I hope that all makes sense, right? There are use cases where I have been using that spotter from SIG quite a bit. Filming, it's awesome for filming, and the other one is for shooting, like your long range shooting, having fun shooting in real world conditions. It's great to have. And the other thing is in the truck, it's great to have, right? Just pop up a spotter real quick and look. For long duration glassing, I personally am not finding the use case yet. That might change. Like I said, I haven't used it all that much. Okay, let's see here. Leo, let's answer your question. Maybe this will be the last one. Leo says, bear hunting question. If you bump a bear in the woods, do they tend to bolt or run a bit and settle down like elk when they think they aren't getting pressured? Can you track them in the woods? Yeah, so bears a lot of times will sprint off and then like not go that far. I would say like relative to elk are much more likely to get out of the country versus a bear. A lot of times bears will run for like 100 yards and then they start walking. They're kind of lazy. I will tell you, like, this is also like a function of where bears typically are. A lot of times they'll get into cover really quick and then they start moving real slow. You know what I mean? So you'll see that a lot. I don't think that bears, and I shouldn't say that. I don't think that the seasons that we hunt bears in, springtime and fall, I don't feel that bears are very sensitive to pressure. And the reason that is because biologically during those periods of time, they are infatuated with feeding. So feeding is dominant, right? Like it's the dominant survival factor for them. In the spring they got up, they haven't been eating, they got to get to it. And then in the fall, they have got to put body weight on. If they don't, they're going to die in hibernation, right? So they're frantically feeding during that hyperphagia phase or whatever. So that is number one. Pressure, from what I've seen, won't knock them off the best acorn patch, right? You kill one, you one night you're glassing, you're in the spot, you're in the money spot, like every bear in the country's there. There's 6 bears working that huge chunk of, primo acorns, right? You literally shoot one with an unsuppressed, let's call it a braked rifle, loud, echoes throughout the canyon. All the bears run out of there, dead bear. You do your thing. You're in there for 4 hours at night in the dark. You're talking to you do your pictures. You're in there, you're all sorts of noise, everything else. Come back in there, the same spot. Most of those bears will come back. So they come back because they have to come to that feed. You know what I mean? Like that is the primary thing that's going to keep them alive. Elk and deer, I feel like it's much less that, and they're dialed into the fact that, hey, the number one thing that I got to deal with is the fact that there's all these predators out there and people trying to kill me, right? So that's the number one thing for them. Once they're exposed to pressure, they're in areas that are pressure that's dominant relative to bears. All right, guys, let me just see here. Last one because it's so easy. Read from Instagram, 6.5 PRC or 7 PRC for black bear. Either one, man. The 6.5 is probably more fun to shoot, less recoil than the 7 PRC. I mean, they're both way enough gun for black bear. Black bears are not tough. It's all about placement on bears, and it's all about shooting them twice if you get a chance. Yeah, so that's an easy one. Any advice? Noah has any advice on first week of archery in Colorado? Yeah, come early and find the bulls before the season. If you got 7 days to hunt, come 2 days before the season opens, 5 days to hunt. Okay, you got 10 days to hunt, come 3 days before the season, hunt for 7 days. That period of time is the one time in Colorado where you can find out pretty consistently, and those are going to stick around for a little bit until they start getting harassed. So it's my favorite week of archery to hunt for that very reason. But there's sticky scouting info there. Let's see here. Awesome, guys. I'm gonna let you go. Thanks, guys. Lloyd, congrats, dude. I'll reach out to you. Appreciate all the questions, guys. I hope you guys found some of this useful. I will catch you guys later. If you enjoyed this content, do me a huge favor. Subscribe on whatever platform you consume it on. Spotify, Apple, YouTube, whatever works for you guys. Everything else is on my website, pursuitwithcliff.com. Go there and it's going to be very apparent to you that I work my ass off just to not have a real job. All the hunts I guide, all the seminars I put on, all the unique experiences I offer, and the membership site, all the details are there.